Hi, welcome back to another Celltomic video, and today we'll be learning how to solve quadratic equations using completing the square method. So, completing the square is one method that we will learn to solve quadratic equations. So, subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss any of the videos when we learn another method to solve quadratic equations. Okay, so solving quadratic equations using completing a square allows us to change this form of the equation, the one that we normally see, into this final form here. And this new written equation will be easier to solve for x. Another good thing about completing a square is that we are able to plot the graph using the final form. Okay, so completing a square can be made easier using this formula here. So from this formula, you can see that we are only taking the coefficient of the x and dividing it by 2, and that will be more than enough for us to form our final form. So things to note before starting any completing a square question is to ensure that the coefficient of x squared is 1. If the coefficient of x squared is not 1, then we will need to change the equation accordingly, be it by dividing or by multiplying the whole equation. Second, if you're asked to solve the equation, ensure that the sum of this part here is always less than 0. So that means it's always negative. What I mean is this part of the equation here is always negative. You will know the reason why later. And lastly, the final form of the equation helps us to plot the graph, where D and E are the turning points of the graph, and D and E represents x and y respectively. We'll see that later when we'll do examples. Okay, so let's move on to our very first example. For this example, I've placed the formula down so that we can see what the final form should be. Okay, so this equation is x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals to 0. Okay, first things first, we need to check whether rule 1, which is ensure that the coefficient is 1, is true or not. So for this equation, the coefficient of x squared is 1, so that is rule 1 checked off immediately. Okay, so this means that we can go into the question now. So the first thing we want to find is what is b over 2. So b over 2 is actually just the coefficient of the x. So in this case it's 4. So we take 4 over 2 and we get 2. So now we have the value of b over 2, we can write the final form out. So for this question, we should get this equation is x plus 2 square minus 2 square plus 1 equals to 0. And what we get is x plus 2 whole thing square minus 3 equals to 0. Now, since we are asked to solve for this equation, in rule number 2, we need to check whether this part is less than 0. So that means it's a negative number, and it's true here because now we get minus 3. So now we can solve this question. Okay, so to solve this question, what do we need to do? We first bring the minus 3 over. So what we get is x plus 2 whole thing square equals to 3. And now what we do? We square root both sides. So we get x plus 2 equals to plus minus root 3. Always remember, when we are square rooting something, there's always the positive and negative number. So now we know our answer is either x equals to root 3 minus 2 or negative root 3 minus 2. So that's the answer for this question. If the question asks you to leave your answer in 3 significant figures, then you can use your calculator to plot in the values. But if they want a more accurate answer, this is sufficient. Okay, so now we're going to try to plot this graph. Okay, now we're going to use this final form here to draw our graph. And we have this over here. Okay, so we can see from this final form, we need to have the negative value. It's x minus d plus e. So e represents negative 3 and d is negative 2, because we can change this to x minus negative 2. So that means that our x value is negative 2, our y value is negative 3. So if we're going to plot the graph, let's plot the graph. We have x value as negative 2, so this is negative 2. Y value is negative 3, so it's somewhere here. They join up here, and then we draw the graph like something like that. Ensure that the turning point is this, and our x values here, and our x values here, and here should be this and this. Okay, now let's move on to another example. Okay, let's look and see whether this question fulfills rule number 1. Right off the bat, we see that there is a 5 in front of x squared, and we know that this does not fulfill rule number 1. So in order for us to ensure that this fulfills rule number 1, we have to divide everything by 5. So once we divide everything by 5, we'll get x squared minus 4 over 5x minus 2 over 5 equals to 0. So what do we need to do? We need to find what is b over 2. So b over 2. So b is 4 over 5 now. 4 over 5 divided by 2 equals to 4 over 10, which is equals to 2 over 5. Okay, now we have our b value. We can solve for the equation. To solve the equation, we first need to write out our final form. So our final form is first, open bracket, x plus, open bracket, minus 2 over 5, close bracket, square. Okay, so this minus sign here actually comes from this minus sign here. So we need to remember that this entire thing is actually negative 4 over 5. So continue, minus b over 2 square, and b over 2 is also minus 2 over 5 square minus 2 over 5 equals to 0. So what we should get is x minus 2 over 5 square minus 0.4 square minus 0.4 equals to 0. So we get x minus 0.4 square minus 0.56 equals to 0. So this part here is less than 0, so it's good. We can solve this question. So our final answer would be x minus 0.4 square equals to 0.56, and then we square root both sides, so x minus 0.4 equals to plus minus square root 0.56, and then we bring the 0.4 over, so we should get x equals to plus minus 0.56 plus 0.4. So this actually means that we're having 0.56 plus 0.4 or negative square root 0.56 plus 0.4, and that's our final value. So that's all we have for today. Hope that this video helps you with the solving of quadratic equations using completing the square. We're going to learn how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. It's a different method. It does the same job as completing the square, and both methods will give you the same answer. So do remember to follow our Instagram account, and do remember to like and subscribe to us. And remember to always stay curious.